I just was following my life, and it wasn't there in Hollywood.
In the early 1980s, one actress seemed unstoppable. 3 Academy Award nominations by age 28. Box office hits that defined a generation. A raw, fearless talent that audiences couldn't get enough of. Then, at the height of her fame, Debra Winger walked away. For years, people wondered where she went and why she left when Hollywood still wanted her. This is what really happened to Debra Winger, the rise to stardom. Mary Debra Winger was born on May 16, 1955, in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, into a Jewish family. Her father, Robert, worked as a meat packer, and her mother, Ruth, was an office manager. The family later moved to California when Debra was young, settling in the San Fernando Valley. Debra's path to acting wasn't straightforward. She started studying criminology and sociology at California State University, Northridge, but never completed her degree. At 18, she took a trip to Israel on what she later described as a typical youth tour that included visiting a kibbutz. Over the years, she sometimes embellished this story in interviews, occasionally claiming she'd trained with the Israeli Defense Forces, though she later clarified it was just a standard tour. When she returned to the United States, something happened that changed everything. Debra fell off a truck and suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. The injury was severe. She was left partially paralyzed and blind for 10 months. Doctors initially told her she might never see again. Those 10 months gave her time to think about what she wanted from life. If she recovered, she decided, she would move to California and become an actress. It wasn't a childhood dream. It was a revelation born from trauma, from lying in darkness and imagining a different future. When her vision returned, and she regained her mobility, Debra kept that promise to herself. She moved to Los Angeles and started auditioning. Her first roles were small, forgettable. In 1976, she appeared in Slumber Party 57, a low-budget film that went nowhere. Then came a 3-episode arc on the television series Wonder Woman, where she played Drusilla, Wonder Girl, the younger sister to Linda Carter's Diana Prince. The producers offered her a recurring role. Debra turned it down. She was worried about being typecast, about being locked into one character before her career had really begun. Years later, she would appear on Late Night with David Letterman wearing her full Wonder Girl costume, poking fun at her own participation in the show. In 1978, she appeared in Thank God It's Friday, a disco comedy that tried to capitalize on the Saturday Night Fever craze. The film was forgettable, but Debra was starting to get noticed. Casting directors saw something in her, an intensity, a refusal to play safe. She wasn't traditionally Hollywood beautiful. She was something more interesting, real, urban cowboy, and breaking through. The role that changed everything came in 1980. James Bridges was directing Urban Cowboy, a film about Texas oil workers who frequented Gilley's, a famous honky-tonk bar in Pasadena, where they could dress up as cowboys and ride mechanical bulls. John Travolta was already attached to star. Sissy Spacek had been offered the female lead, but turned it down. Debra auditioned alongside Michelle Pfeiffer, another newcomer. Debra got the part. As Sissy, she played a fiery, independent young woman who falls for Travolta's bud, marries him too quickly, and then refuses to be controlled by him. The role required Debra to ride a mechanical bull in one of the film's most memorable scenes. She practiced for weeks, determined to do it herself without a double. When that scene appears on screen, Debra isn't just riding the bull. She's proving something. There's satisfaction on her face, a mix of triumph and sadness. She's showing Bud what he's missing, reminding him she won't be made to feel small. The scene helped make her a star. Urban Cowboy was a massive hit, earning over $53 million domestically. Debra received 2 Golden Globe nominations, one for Best Supporting Actress and one for Best New Star of the Year. She also earned a BAFTA nomination. Critics praised her performance, noting how she brought complexity to a role that could have been one-dimensional. Director James Bridges later admitted they'd had a huge fight during filming. Debra refused to play a scene, and he had to shut down the set for an entire day. He was furious with her at the time, but when he looked at the scene again, he realized she'd been right. There was something wrong with the dialogue. Her instinct had been correct. That fight established a pattern that would follow Debra throughout her career. She cared deeply about the work, about getting it right, about not compromising. Some people saw this as professionalism. Others saw it as being difficult. That's the job you do. So this whole thing about celebrity is very confusing. An officer and a gentleman. In 1982, Debra appeared in 2 films. The first, Cannery Row, based on the John Steinbeck novel, paired her with Nick Nolte. The production had been troubled from the start. Raquel Welch was fired after just 8 days of filming, and the film died at the box office. But Debra's next film more than made up for it. An Officer and a Gentleman told the story of Zach Mayo, a naval aviation officer candidate played by Richard Gere, and Paula Pokrivky, a factory worker played by Debra. The film's final scene, where Gere's character in his dress whites carries Debra out of the factory, became one of the most iconic romantic moments in cinema history. But behind the scenes, the production was a nightmare. Debra and director Taylor Hackford clashed constantly. She found him controlling and dismissive of her ideas. Years later, she would describe him as one of the worst directors she'd ever worked with. Hackford, for his part, thought Debra was too combative, too unwilling to compromise. Then, there was Richard Gere, Louis Gossett Jr., who played Sergeant Emile Foley and won an Oscar for the role, later said that while Debra and Gere had incredible chemistry on screen, they couldn't stand each other off camera. The tension between them was palpable. They could barely get through their love scenes because of how much they disliked one another. Debra later described Gere as a brick wall. The feeling was mutual. Gere told interviewers he found Debra unpredictable and difficult to work with. For years, they didn't speak. When Debra was asked to do publicity for the film, she refused. She wouldn't pretend everything had been fine when it hadn't. Despite all the conflict, An Officer and a Gentleman was both a critical and commercial success. It earned $130 million domestically and received multiple Academy Award nominations. Debra was nominated for Best Actress. At 27 years old, she was being recognized as one of the best actresses in Hollywood. After the film's success, Debra did something odd. She provided her voice for E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Her husky tones were mixed into the vocal track that gave E.T. his distinctive voice. It was an uncredited role, a favor to Steven Spielberg, and one of her strangest credits, Terms of Endearment, and The Peak. In 1983, Debra starred in what many consider her finest performance. Terms of Endearment, directed by James L. Brooks, told the story of Emma Greenway and her complicated relationship with her overbearing mother, Aurora. Shirley MacLaine played Aurora, Jack Nicholson played Aurora's astronaut neighbor, and Debra played Emma, a woman trying to live her own life while still loving a mother who can't stop trying to control her. The role required Debra to age from her 20s to her late 30s. Emma marries a man her mother doesn't approve of, has children, deals with her husband's infidelity, and eventually faces a terminal cancer diagnosis. It was emotionally exhausting work, and Debra threw herself into it completely. But once again, the production was marked by conflict. Debra and Shirley MacLaine did not get along. MacLaine was Hollywood royalty by 1983. She'd been nominated for Oscars 4 times and lost each time. She'd paid her dues, waited her turn, and now she was playing a role that seemed tailor-made for her talents. MacLaine approached the film with the confidence of someone who'd been around for decades. Debra was 28 years old, on her second Oscar nomination, and full of ideas about how Emma should be played. She questioned choices, pushed back on direction, and refused to simply defer to the older actress. The two women's first meeting set the tone. MacLaine arrived wearing expensive fur coats, the trappings of movie star glamour. Debra showed up in combat boots and a miniskirt. They were from completely different worlds, with completely different approaches to their craft. During filming, tensions escalated. Both actresses were nominated in the Best Actress category at the Oscars. The media loved the narrative. Mother versus daughter, old Hollywood versus new Hollywood. When MacLaine won, her acceptance speech included the line, "I deserve this." Many people interpreted it as a dig at Debra, though MacLaine later denied that was her intention. Despite the behind-the-scenes drama, Terms of Endearment was a massive success. It won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actress for MacLaine. Debra won the National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Actress, but she didn't win the Oscar. At 28 years old, with 2 nominations and no wins, she was already developing a reputation, not just as a talented actress, but as someone difficult to work with. That reputation, fairly or not, would follow her for the rest of her career. The difficult actress label. The late 1980s brought more films, but fewer triumphs. In 1986, Debra starred in Legal Eagles opposite Robert Redford. The film was poorly received. Debra told the press that director Ivan Reitman was the second worst director she'd ever worked with, after Taylor Hackford. That comment didn't win her any friends in the industry. Made in Heaven and Black Widow, both released in 1987, were commercial disappointments. Debra also turned down several high-profile roles during this period. She passed on Fatal Attraction, which went to Glenn Close, and became a massive hit. She passed on Bull Durham, which made a star of Susan Sarandon. Most famously, she was cast in A League of Their Own, but dropped out. The official reason was creative differences. The truth, as Debra later admitted, was simpler. She refused to work with Madonna. Debra didn't consider Madonna a serious actress. Gina Davis replaced her, and the film became a beloved classic. There was also the incident with Peggy Sue Got Married. Debra was set to star opposite Nicolas Cage in Francis Ford Coppola's time travel romance. Then, just before production began, Debra injured her back in a bicycle accident. The injury was severe enough that she had to withdraw. Kathleen Turner took the role and earned an Oscar nomination. The pattern was clear. Debra had strong opinions about directors, about co-stars, about scripts. She spoke her mind, and in Hollywood, especially for women, that came with consequences. In a 1986 interview, Bette Davis told Barbara Walters that she saw a great deal of herself in Debra Winger, who had already acquired a reputation for being difficult because she cared about the project. But understanding why Debra was labeled difficult didn't change the fact that the label stuck. Casting directors became wary. Directors didn't want the headache. Slowly, the quality of roles being offered to Debra declined. Shadowlands, and one more nomination. In 1993, Debra earned her third Academy Award nomination for Shadowlands. She played Joy Davidman, the American poet who became the wife of C.S. Lewis. Anthony Hopkins starred as Lewis, and the film told the story of their unlikely romance and her eventual death from cancer. Debra adopted a clipped New York accent for the role, something different from her usual delivery. She brought intelligence and fierce independence to Joy, a woman who challenged Lewis's ideas about faith and love. The performance reminded everyone why Debra had been considered one of the best actresses of her generation. She was nominated for Best Actress. She lost again, this time to Holly Hunter for The Piano. It was Debra's third nomination without a win. She was 38 years old, and the roles were already starting to dry up. That same year, she received a Golden Globe nomination for A Dangerous Woman, playing a mentally impaired woman trying to navigate life and love. The role showcased Debra's range, her ability to disappear into a character. But the film received limited release and was seen by relatively few people. In 1995, Debra starred in Forget Paris with Billy Crystal, a romantic comedy about a couple whose relationship survives despite the obstacles life throws at them. It was pleasant, charming, and completely forgettable. More importantly, it would be Debra's last film for 6 years. Walking away. The decision came while Debra was in Ireland. She stood on a road and told her boyfriend at the time, actor Arliss Howard, "That's it, I'm done." She was 40 years old. She'd been making films for nearly 2 decades. She'd earned 3 Oscar nominations, and she was exhausted. Later, Debra would explain her decision in interviews. She told People magazine that she'd wanted out for years. The parts that were coming weren't interesting anymore. She'd already played those roles or felt those feelings. She needed to be challenged, and Hollywood wasn't challenging her anymore. Her son Noah, from her first marriage to actor Timothy Hutton, told the New York Times that his mother was a thoughtful parent, and it had been hard for her to bring the commitment to her work that it required when her children were young. Being a mother meant something to Debra, and she couldn't do both things well at the same time. "Why did you get interested in acting to begin with?" "It was by accident. I did not plan on it." In 1996, Debra married Arliss Howard, whom she'd met on the set of Wilder Napalm. They had a son, Gideon Babe, in 1997. Debra became stepmother to Howard's son, Sam, from his previous marriage. The family settled in New York City, far from Hollywood. During her hiatus, Debra stayed busy. She performed in stage productions, taught as a teaching fellow at Harvard University for a semester, and got involved in environmental activism and charity work. She raised her children. Debra's absence from film became a cultural talking point. Rosanna Arquette made a documentary in 2002 called Searching for Debra Winger, exploring the challenges faced by actresses over 40 in Hollywood. The documentary featured interviews with many actresses talking about ageism and sexism in the industry. Debra herself appeared at the end, having a frank conversation with Arquette about creativity and vitality and the choices women have to make. The documentary brought attention to an uncomfortable truth. Hollywood had no idea what to do with talented actresses once they reached middle age. Debra had simply chosen to step away before Hollywood could push her out. The Return. In 2001, Debra returned to acting in Big Bad Love, a film written and directed by her husband Arliss Howard. It was a small, independent film, not a major studio production. Debra didn't come back with fanfare. She came back quietly, on her own terms. Over the next several years, she took roles in small films. Radio in 2003 reunited her with Cuba Gooding Jr. in a feel-good sports drama that was critically panned. Eulogy in 2004 was a dark comedy that went nowhere. Sometimes in April in 2005, dealt with the Rwandan genocide and earned strong reviews but limited distribution. Then, in 2008, Debra appeared in Rachel Getting Married, an independent film directed by Jonathan Demme. She played a mother whose complicated relationship with her daughters forms the emotional core of the story. Anne Hathaway starred as the troubled daughter, and Debra brought layers of pain and regret to her performance as a woman who'd failed her children in fundamental ways. The film earned critical acclaim. Hathaway was nominated for an Oscar. Debra wasn't, but her performance reminded people of what they'd been missing. This was the actress who'd captivated audiences in the 1980s, still capable of devastating emotional honesty. In 2012, Debra made her Broadway debut in David Mamet's The Anarchist opposite Patti LuPone. The two-character play was a critical and commercial failure, closing after just 17 performances. But Debra had proven she could command a stage as well as a screen. In 2016, she joined the cast of The Ranch, a Netflix sitcom starring Ashton Kutcher, Sam Elliott, and Danny Masterson. The show was exactly the kind of laugh-track comedy that people assumed Debra would avoid. But she told Entertainment Tonight she took the role because she'd never done a traditional sitcom before. It was a new challenge, something different. The show ran for 4 seasons, giving Debra steady work and introducing her to a new generation of viewers. Well, I'm sort of a strange mix. I think I used to be more romantic. I'm probably more of a realist now. In 2017, she starred in The Lovers, a romantic comedy about a long married couple stuck in a failing marriage who find their way back to each other. The role was her first romantic lead in 22 years. At 62, Debra was playing complex, flawed characters again, reminding audiences why they'd fallen in love with her in the first place. She also mellowed with age. In 2011, she presented an award to Richard Gere, and the two were gracious to each other. In 2017, she spoke kindly about Taylor Hackford in interviews, acknowledging that while they'd fought during An Officer and a Gentleman, the film had been important for both of their careers. The feuds that had defined much of her reputation were finally fading into history. The legacy. Debra Winger never won an Academy Award. 3 nominations, 3 losses. But Debra's impact on cinema goes beyond awards. She represented something important in the 1980s. A female character who wasn't just beautiful or charming, but real, tough, vulnerable, complex. She played women who wanted love, but refused to compromise themselves for it. Her decision to walk away at 40, at the height of her fame, has taken on mythic proportions. In an industry that discards actresses the moment they age out of ingenue roles, Debra chose to leave before Hollywood could push her aside. She prioritized her personal life over her career. She raised her children. She lived on her own terms. And when she came back, it was because she wanted to, not because she needed to. At 69 years old, Debra continues to act occasionally, appearing in films like Kajillionaire in 2020. She's selective about the projects she takes, but she's still working. Debra has also been open about her views on Hollywood. She's spoken about the sexism she experienced, about being called difficult when male actors who behaved the same way were called passionate or dedicated. She's talked about the lack of interesting roles for women over 40, a problem that persists despite more awareness of the issue. Debra's career offers no easy answers. She made choices that cost her opportunities. She spoke her mind when staying silent might have been smarter. She walked away when other actresses would have fought to stay. Those choices made her life richer, but they also meant her career never reached the heights it might have. But Debra Winger was never interested in playing games. She wanted to make good films, play interesting characters, and live a life that meant something beyond box office receipts and award nominations. By that measure, she succeeded completely. What really happened to Debra Winger? She became one of the greatest actresses of her generation. She earned 3 Oscar nominations before age 40. She walked away from Hollywood at the peak of her fame because the work no longer challenged her, and because her family needed her more than the movie industry did. She returned years later, on her own terms, and continued making films that interested her, rather than films that would make her famous again. She never won the Oscar. She never became the kind of Hollywood legend who gets Lifetime Achievement Awards and gala retrospectives. But she lived a life true to herself, made films that mattered, and proved that there's more than one way to have a successful career in Hollywood. The lesson of Debra Winger's story isn't about fame or awards or box office numbers. It's about knowing what you value and having the courage to choose it, even when everyone else thinks you're making a mistake. Sometimes the bravest thing an actress can do isn't staying in the spotlight, it's stepping out of it, living quietly, and only returning when there's something worth returning for. That's what really happened to Debra Winger. She chose herself, and that choice, more than any award or accolade, defines her legacy. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.